The late 18th century was a time of great upheaval in Europe. The French Revolution had shaken the foundations of monarchical power. A young Corsican artillery officer began his meteoric rise to power. Napoleon Bonaparte quickly distinguished himself in the French Revolutionary Wars. His tactical genius and charisma caught the attention of his superiors. By 1799, Napoleon had become a national hero in France. On November 9, 1799, he staged a coup d'état known as the 18th Brumaire. In 1804, he crowned himself emperor, establishing the First French Empire. The origins of the Napoleonic Wars can be traced back to the French Revolutionary Wars. These conflicts had pitted France against various coalitions of European powers. Napoleon's rise to power and his aggressive foreign policy exacerbated these tensions. One of the primary causes of the Napoleonic Wars was the ongoing rivalry between France and Great Britain. The brief Peace of Amiens in 1802 did little to resolve their fundamental differences. When war resumed in 1803, it was largely due to British fears of French domination of the continent. Austria, Prussia and Russia viewed Napoleon's coronation as a threat to the balance of power in Europe. The formation of the Third Coalition in 1805 marked the beginning of the Napoleonic Wars proper. Britain, Austria, Russia and Sweden allied themselves against France. Napoleon saw war as an opportunity to expand French influence and secure his own position. The Napoleonic Wars were characterized by a series of large-scale battles and ambitious military campaigns. One of the earliest and most significant battles was the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805. Often called Napoleon's greatest victory, it saw the French emperor decisively defeat the combined forces of Austria and Russia. The twin battles of Jena and Auerstedt in October 1806 resulted in the crushing defeat of the Prussian army. The Peninsular War, which began in 1808, marked a turning point in the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon's invasion of Spain and Portugal opened up a new front that would drain French resources for years. Perhaps the most ambitious and disastrous of Napoleon's campaigns was the invasion of Russia in 1812. The Grande Armée, numbering over 600,000 men, crossed into Russia in June. The French finally won a Pyrrhic victory at Borodino in September, but found Moscow abandoned and burning when they arrived. Forced to retreat as winter set in, the Grande Armée was decimated. This campaign marked the beginning of the end for Napoleon's empire. Napoleon Bonaparte was the central figure of the Napoleonic Wars. Other individuals also played crucial roles. Napoleon's marshals distinguished themselves. Michel Ney was a key commander. Louis-Nicolas Davout was undefeated in battle. William Pitt the Younger formed coalitions against France. Admiral Horatio Nelson ensured British naval supremacy. Tsar Alexander I became Napoleon's opponent. Field Marshal Mikhail Kutuzov wore down the French army. Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. Section 5. Napoleon's Grand Strategy. Napoleon's approach to warfare was revolutionary for its time. He emphasized speed, mobility, and concentration of force. This strategy, known as maneuver warfare, allowed Napoleon to outmaneuver his opponents and defeat them in detail. He would often march his army rapidly to place it between enemy forces, then defeat them separately before they could unite. Another key aspect of Napoleon's strategy was his use of the corps system. He organized his army into self-contained corps, each capable of fighting independently for a short time. Napoleon also placed great emphasis on artillery. He often massed his artillery to create a grand battery that could smash enemy formations and open the way for infantry and cavalry attacks. However, Napoleon's strategy had its weaknesses. The campaigns in Spain and Russia in particular exposed the limitations of Napoleon's approach when faced with determined resistance and difficult terrain. Section 6. The Continental System and Economic Warfare. Unable to defeat Britain militarily due to its naval supremacy, Napoleon attempted to bring it to its knees through economic warfare. This strategy took the form of the Continental system, introduced in 1806 through the Berlin Decree. The system aimed to close European ports to British trade, thereby strangling the British economy, which relied heavily on exports. The Continental system required the cooperation, willing or forced, of all European states. However, the Continental system proved difficult to enforce and had significant drawbacks. Smuggling was rampant, and many countries only half-heartedly implemented the blockade. The system also hurt continental economies, depriving them of British goods and colonial products like sugar and coffee. Britain, while certainly affected by the blockade, proved more resilient than Napoleon had anticipated. It found new markets in Latin America and increased trade with its colonies. The Royal Navy's control of the seas allowed Britain to continue trading with much of the world. Section 7. The invasion of Russia and Napoleon's downfall. The year 1812 marked a turning point in the Napoleonic Wars. Frustrated by Russia's lax enforcement of the Continental system, Napoleon decided to invade. On June 24, 1812, the Grande Armée, numbering over 600,000 men, crossed the Niemen River into Russia. However, the Russian campaign quickly ran into difficulties. The Russians, under the command of Barclay de Tolly and later Kutuzov, refused to give battle on Napoleon's terms. They retreated into the vast Russian interior, destroying supplies and infrastructure as they went. The retreat from Moscow turned into one of the greatest military disasters in history. By the time Napoleon reached friendly territory in December, only about 10,000 effective soldiers remained from his original force. Section 8. The 100 Days and Waterloo. Napoleon's defeat in Russia led to a cascade of events that ultimately resulted in his abdication and exile to the island of Elba in 1814. However, the story was not yet over. On February 26, 1815, Napoleon made a daring escape from Elba and returned to France. This began the period known as the 100 Days. Landing with a small force, Napoleon quickly gathered support and marched on Paris. The army sent to arrest him instead rallied to his cause, and he entered Paris triumphantly on March 20th. The final battle came on June 18, 1815, near the village of Waterloo. Napoleon attacked the British position, held by the Duke of Wellington, hoping to defeat them before the Prussians could arrive. The timely arrival of Prussian forces under Blucher tipped the scales. This defeat marked the final end of Napoleon's rule and of the French Empire he had built. Section 9. Legacy and impact of the Napoleonic Wars. The Napoleonic Wars left an indelible mark on European and world history. The Congress of Vienna, which concluded in 1815, redrew borders and attempted to restore the pre-revolutionary balance of power. However, the ideas of nationalism and liberalism that had spread during the Napoleonic era could not be easily suppressed. The wars also had profound social and economic impacts. The massive scale of the conflicts accelerated industrial development, particularly in Britain. The need for weapons and supplies stimulated manufacturing and led to technological innovations. Militarily, the Napoleonic Wars transformed the nature of warfare. Napoleon's innovations in strategy, tactics, and military organization were studied and adopted by armies around the world. The legacy of Napoleon himself remains complex and controversial, but his Napoleonic Code had a lasting impact on legal systems around the world.